Welcome to today's episode of the Women Crush Wednesday 1Source series. I am Tiffany Presney, founder of 1Source Management Consulting, and we are the home of Peaceful Project Management. Today I am talking to Dr. Kimberly Harris, founder and principal researcher of Educa Consulting, a full-service research and evaluation social science firm specializing in economic landscape issues that impact housing, food, criminal justice, and workforce economies. Dr. Harris conducts research, evaluation, and assessment with a social justice lens. She is trained in culturally responsive research and evaluation methods, and she's also a member of ACE, which is the Advancing Culturally Responsive and Equitable Evaluation Network. Dr. Harris is skilled in mixed qualitative and quantitative approaches, including quasi-experimental methodologies. Welcome today, Dr. Kim.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Tiffany.
Initially, please tell me more about the name of your organization because it is significant.
Thank you for that question. So, as you stated, the name of my company is Educa Consulting, and Educa, which is the root of education, it means to draw out, right? And so, that's just struck me when making that connection of the significance of the meaning of, and that's what we strive to do in education, right? We seek to draw out knowledge to help, facilitate, a good educator is someone that is working alongside even the youngest learner to bring out their own brilliance, right? And so when I thought about, a name to describe the work that I wanted to do with my company all those years ago, Educa was just the name that I returned to, drawing out the best in the folks that I work with. And then also too, and in doing so, and cultivating those relationships, them also drawing out the best in me. So that's how we got at Educa.
And I will say, as somebody who has worked with you in the past, you absolutely do draw out the best certainly inspired higher levels in me as well. So tell me
back at you.
Tell me more about how you got here, like how you got to owning your own business. Can you tell me more about what your path to business ownership was like?
Oh, wow. So when I began operating under the name of Educa, it was years ago. When I was still an educator working in the community college system. And basically Educa's beginnings were beginnings of work where I was working with a lot of doctoral level students who needed research consulting help and help with, basically getting their dissertation to that final kind of push. So I would basically help them with edits, with just kind of being that person to help them through those 5 chapters, conceptualizing them and kind of that external coach or partner to help them get to completion. And at that time, I was still, of course, employed, working in the higher education system. Fast forward to completing my own PhD and doing work as a researcher. The evolution of Educa really was a natural one. The way that I kind of reflect on it all. Began to do work with some of my professors when I was in my grad program with doing consulting and evaluation work, where I was helping to edit book chapters and also participate in different program evaluations. At that time, a lot of the program evaluation work that I did was work that centered around STEM education. And so, just as my skill sets grew, my interests expanded and deepened and broadened. Basically, Educa's did as well. So where we are now, so that's just kind of like the I guess the story of the services and offerings that we currently provide. Which we do full scale TA, research evaluation, all the things that you mentioned. But making that switch to be a full time, exclusive, nothing else to fall back on, really happened right around the time of COVID. As I said before, Educa had been operating for years, but at that time I was doing Educa and other things, and it was through a relationship that I had with an amazing mentor that we both know and love, Jerry Peak, giving a shout out to her. And then also relationships that I had with other amazing people, like I'm thinking about Mendel and Anderson, who we also both know as well. It was one of those things where I was just everything aligned, and it was a several conversations and just kind of standing in the knowing of I've arrived at a place where I think I can do this independently. And really to even take the I think out and just to say, I can do this independently. I can do this exclusively, not this and another gig, not this and a 9 to 5, but this. And just kind of committed myself to that process and haven't looked back.
That is wonderful. I like that. That's wonderful energy. So what you're telling me is that a lot of the work that you do is utilizing data and research to promote social justice. So my next question to you is going to be, what advice would you give to someone looking to use data in their social justice efforts?
Wow, I love that question. I would say look all around you, right? And look all around you. And what I mean by that, for the containers, the sources of the data. One of the things that I really appreciate about doing the work that I do from a culturally responsive posture is the fact of the intentionality of acknowledging that wisdom comes from the people. Typically as researchers, we have been historically the image, the stance, the assumption, and the way that we kind of interact, right, in the world, and from the positionality of a researcher is one where we have been convinced, because coming through the academy is the process where we hold the knowledge, we create new knowledge. That's really what one of the fundamental definitions of research is, to create or expand knowledge. And we typically think about that as something that we do, if not siloed in an exclusive space of people who have been trained like us. And if I'm completely honest, and Tiffany, we've had these conversations, and typically with people who don't look like us, right? So typically when we think about what is it to be a researcher and to do research, we think about exclusively white and typically historically male spaces. And the relationships with the sources of knowledge have been very extractive ones, where, you go into spaces with people who often don't look like you to tap into what they know, almost like raw material that you can then take back, refine, and do sense making, and then report back and tell people in almost a prescriptive posture what they should then do to make their lives better. Mm-hmm. And that we know from just looking at our landscapes, our social landscapes, our medical landscapes, our economic landscapes, just looking at our world. That has been a formula that really hasn't yielded what we have purported it to yield. That's been a way of doing business, if you will, that really has had a diminishing return out of the gate. Because to do the work that we do and not acknowledge, full-throatedly acknowledge that the wisdom comes from the people, and that we will take our training to work with the people to help people really identify the answers that they already have. And one of the things that we say at Educa, and website coming soon, but it is on our website, is that we are really not magicians. We're not alchemists. We're not here to create or find a magic answer for you. We're just here to work alongside you, shoulder to shoulder, as you discover the answers. Because sometimes to really engage in critical critique of questions on your pathway to problem solving, sometimes when you're very close to it, it doesn't mean that you don't have the wherewithal to really kind of harness and analyze and arrive at answers. But sometimes the process can be protracted because the pain points are so acute, because you live with it in ways that others who are not really in that place and space every day, you live with it in ways that they do not. So going back to your question about how would I advise, or what advice would I give to folks who are looking to really utilize data in their business and in their social justice work, is to, first of all, honor, respect, and acknowledge that if you're doing social justice work, right? That first part of that, you can't do it without people. And it's not a prescriptive process. It is a highly collaborative process. And it is a process that mandates respect. It is a process that is buttressed on honesty. And if you're going to do this work with people, it is just that, with them and not for them. Mm-hmm. Because no matter how our situations kind of ebb and flow and change over time, it's only when our full agency is activated that we get at the solutions that we're striving toward, and no one saves us, right? So I would just say, start with acknowledging that. And then I would say, from that posture of humility, you can do amazing things. You can basically, from that posture of humility, cultivate the types of relationships, respect and human-centered relationships that enable people to share with you in ways that they would not, because they respect and trust you to respect what they've shared with you, and hold it in a way and utilize it in a way that is not absent their voice. Mm-hmm. And in as much as possible, I would say, check in often with the people that you're working with, and just be postured and ready for all of the ways that their wisdom can enhance and expand your own, and appreciate and prepare for the fact that it's going to be a very bi-directional and dynamic relationship that you'll be building in community.
Absolutely. And I would think too that applies for, like folks like yourself who really work in that space as researchers, but also for people, like myself, or, like my former positions where, you're working in, any kind of organization, but, you see that need for improvement in terms of how minorities are treated, marginalized communities are treated inside of the organization. So using data, information, and research and all of those things that you were just talking about in promoting that, even inside, you could work at Bob's Widget Factory and say, I'm going to use some of these techniques to make a better space for all people that are in the organization and that the organization might serve. So
I couldn't have said that any better. I mean, Tiffany, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, when you think about, my dad, who worked really for he had a couple of careers because his first love was art, but my dad retired from IBM. And when, I would hear him talk about, some of the initiatives that they would have where they're like, we're seeking, employee input to help us with process improvement. What is that other than research, right? Where you're taking all of your lived experience in your position as, as a widget worker at a factory, or working alongside someone else, and you're saying, okay, what do you see? Here's what I see. What do you see? Let's think about this question. And we know question always leads process. And then how do we come together to then think through and think about solutions that can make it better for all of us? I mean, I've been fortunate enough, Tiffany, to see you do what you do, and you do a lot of things up under your 1Source umbrella, and you do them all so amazingly well. Seeing you do the work that you do, from project management and planning, and thinking at that systems level, and how you with intentionality and just the spirit of like commitment to collaborating with your partners and their partners to think through and how and what those conversations, hearing you talk to a room and to a group of people from different walks of life as we think through how do we take a project from conceptualization to deliverable to deliverable to deliverable. I think is truly a masterclass in what this is all about, right? Shoulder to shoulder with people, thinking through, acknowledging who you are, acknowledging who they are, and how do we bring all of that together to arrive at the places where we're trying to go. So ditto to what you said. Yes.
Yeah, I must say, I do kind of have this feeling. It's like, I can't help you if I don't know you. And I don't know what it is that you're really trying to achieve. So, like once we know each other, I feel like now we on a team. Now we working together. Now we making some moves together.
I love it.
Me feels so good to know that has a wonderful impact. Okay, so let's get to some challenges. What challenges have you faced while you use data to promote social justice? And was there anything that truly surprised you along the way?
I think I'm going to take the second part of your question first, because this might sound corny, but it's just my truth. There is not really a lot that surprises me. Now I'll get off this call and then everything I'll see will have my mouth gaping open. But I say that not because it's a canned answer, but really there hasn't been a lot that surprised me, because honestly, I just been in a seat of awe and wonder, right? So it's hard to be surprised when you're walking into something with not a lot of preformed expectations. The only thing I expect to do is to do my best, even when I don't really know what that looks like completely in that moment. So there's not a lot that surprised me. There is a lot that I just and I'm just thinking through some things and editing as I respond. But there are some things that have kind of maybe given me pause. And some of those things have been more on the business side of things around money. Let's be real and honest about it. That can often create situations where you're like, I didn't think, this would be the situation, and that's when I kind of go back to like that whole, because like when I did my dissertation, my framework theoretically was resource dependence, right? And kind of how, the availability of resources and to what degree you're tethered to certain types of resources will shift and inform how true and your level of fidelity to your mission and the way and the processes that you may have initially started out with. So I won't say that I've been terribly surprised. There have been a few times where I've been like, wow, I didn't think that would be quite the situation. But then that's kind of like life, right? I will say though, the first part of your question, thinking about your question around challenges, especially when it pertains to data and doing this work. Not everybody is ready to hear, right? Basically, the truth kind of being told to them or spoken to them. And I'm thinking about individual and collective truth, right? Because what is, research and data collection other than just basically, synthesizing, gathering, holding, synthesizing, sharing, making meaning around the information that we discover. And as a culturally responsive researcher and evaluator, being intentional about co-creating those experiences. But what happens when what we find is jarring to folks who may be, let's say, writing the check, or let's say to other stakeholders who we really lean on and lean into to do the work, right? And what I've often, found, or what I tend to walk away with, is not a cynical sense of, oh, you just can't handle the truth. Oftentimes, hearing information that runs against the grain of what you may expect to have discovered or things that may not confirm your assumptions about how things operate, is that it forces you to stretch in ways that you just probably weren't prepared to stretch. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is the biggest hurdle or the biggest challenge. It's not so much saying, I've got this news to lay upon you that you're not ready for, but it's, hey, I am going to sit with you as we think through how do we stretch into something different that's really responsive to the realities that the sense making and meaning making has told us, right? Mm-hmm. And that then is the part, because so typically it's never so much the news as it is, how do we deal with what that means for us? What are the implications of what we're finding? Mm-hmm. So the challenges can sometimes be, not always, but sometimes be, how do we think through, or how do we sit with, how do we take a beat and understand that what we're hearing may not have been what we anticipated. It may not be like, the outcomes, the impact and the outcomes may be totally not what we intended based upon our mission, based upon our political or social stance, based upon our logic model, based upon whatever. But if we can agree that we're still committed to outcomes that are human-centered, that really prioritize people and conditions for people that really honor their humanness, let's sit with this and let's unpack it. And let's take a beat to figure out, how do we respond? How are we responsive to it? How do we honor what we see? And how do we craft and co-create a strategy to get to, not to so much get past it, but to move through it in a way that changes that landscape. And in the process, more than likely change us. But my faith and what I've seen play out time and time again, it changes us for the better.
But I would imagine you have to lean into accepting and working with that information, because I can imagine, because I've seen it myself in the past. Sometimes folks just get very resistant. It's like, are you going to be flexible? Is this information going to cause growth, or are you going to settle into being rigid almost and pushing back against it and being like, I know I see the information, I know I see the data. Let's find some more data.
That part, right? Right. Yeah. And listen, we laugh about that, and that's the real thing. Well, there's got to be. Well, did you look at this report? We're like, yeah, we did. Well, and the reality of it is just that, and that's why I love the whole. And let's just take that beat. And sometimes, taking a beat looks like a no-cost extension. Right, where we're going to still get the work done, but what we're going to say is that we're going to, let's say, allow more time on the back end to do things where you're not worried about, oh my God, the clock is running and you got to pay out X more money, or, oh my God, the clock is running and we have to just deliver something to get X more money. No, the clock is running, but we're going to put just a little bit more time on the clock, because it's worth it for us to sit through this moment of discomfort, because that's what it is. And most of the times it's that fear of, as Nina Simone, I love that song where she says, oh my God, don't let me be misunderstood. Mm-hmm. A funder, fear of being misunderstood by stakeholders who could then say, oh my gosh, we've always moved and touted a position of being X, a company that's about improving outcomes for everyone in life, or whatever the lovely and flowery and wonderful language that I believe the origins of that language is rooted in good intent. I have to believe that, and I do. But in the same breath, processes and systems and structures, right? Oftentimes ones that are the ones that exacerbate oppressive realities that folks can find themselves getting caught up in. Those processes, those systems, those structures don't leave these organizations untouched as well. They have folks that are expecting deliverables from them, timelines and return on investment, all the things that they have to do to justify that they should continue to do the work that they do. The question is, will you do that work in the same ways that you've done it? And when we can take that beat I'm hearing that song of Nina Simone play in my ear, Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood. And understand that data is not an indictment. Data just reflects what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And if the music stops in any of our lives in any moment in time, we may not be in our most flattering light, right? But that doesn't negate everything that we've done before or all that we'll do after. So, that's the posture that's the spirit that I seek to enter into conversation with the client partner around. This is not an indictment. This is just a picture of where we are. And that picture, just like, a spectrum of color, that's being influenced by so many things, a lot of which, you may be this big, powerful, amazing organization, but you still don't control everything. So there are things in the landscape that you need to be aware of that we then can think through together. How do we still stay true to the work? How do we still prioritize the outcomes that we agree are the ones that matter in light of the realities that we grapple with in the moment?
Mm-hmm. That is very true. And I think that what's coming to my mind right now is the impact of social media on the voice of the people, because right now I think some of that data is going to spring back at you. You might not have to go digging for it. It might find you before you find it. And one thing I've seen like over and over again in social media spaces is, not necessarily seeing organizations or businesses be perfect, but see how they interact. Like, see how do they react with the information that they're finding? How do they react when the news is not great? How do they handle it? Is it denial? Is it anger? Is it retribution? Is it mockery in some cases? Or is it a deep breath and an acknowledgement that says, okay, well, we're gonna work on this, because that can affect a lot. But
that is so true. No, go please. No, that is so true, because as you're sharing that, and I'm just thinking about, and we're always checking in on each other's projects, and I know that you work on some interesting and fascinating projects, and as do I. I think one of the undeniable things that we know about part of this landscape that we're talking about is that the audience, the consumers of information, it's growing, it's diverse. This public, right? And most of our clients are concerned with their public, their client base, expanding that client base, shoring up, client fidelity around, their brand and what they do. But also realizing that we're dealing with a sophisticated group of consumers across, all of these sectors who, because of, technology and because of all of the different ways that information can be consumed and sometimes even defiled, spun, manipulated, but even that isn't lost on, the public, right? We are aware of all of these different things. And I think that, part of what we do in our respective roles is to sit with our clients to say, trust the people with the truth, because guess what? They know it anyway. We live in an age where there is just so much that happens so quickly, and that genie's been out of the bottle for a minute, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not so much about trying to craft a storyline or a tagline or a headline that folks are going to believe. It's just really folks are oftentimes waiting to see, to your point, how are you going to move with what we all know? Are you going to act like the emperor with no clothes, and what you see is not what you see? Or are you just going to say, all right, how are we going to just lean in together and make this thing work?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's not going to be one young person that says that emperor doesn't have any clothes. That little kid has a lot of friends these days.
Exactly. And look, he's got you on tape just walking down the street. So you just might as well be like, well,
Yeah, we don't play those games anymore.
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. And that is a challenge, but it's also refreshing.
It very much is. Gen Z, Gen Alpha. They are wonderful, and I appreciate that energy all the time. So let me switch tracks just a little bit so I can ask you a whole different question, and that's about peace. Because you are a business owner, a community member, very busy and full life, and I would say, how do you find peace while you juggle business ownership with all of your other responsibilities? Because I know that they're busy.
Wow, how do I find peace? Well, outside of the kitchen, no, and eating all the cookies, no, true peace and not true peace and not crutches. Honestly and truly, that is an ever evolving thing for me. Part of my peace is when I can truly realize that, peace is something that we oftentimes say that we're striving to find or achieve, but peace, we came here with peace. I believe we entered this world with peace. And that was just the peace in knowing that we were connected with something that requires us to be responsible, but it's also a reflection of us, right? And so I think the ultimate peace that I have and find is that ultimately it's all going to work out. And when I take that beat and that breath, I can move in a way where I don't overextend myself, where I can be honest, where I can be gracious with myself. So I'm not basically, accommodating the world and at the cost of my own physical and emotional health. Where I can say loving no's, honest no's, and enthusiastic yeses, knowing that in each moment, in that moment, I really tried to do my best in that moment. I tried to be honest with the information that I had. I'm trying to honor who I am. I'm trying to be present for folks that I know and sometimes folks that I don't. And I'm always trusting. And this I do know, even though I don't know the why or the, not the why, but the how, that it's all going to work out. So that is really where I find my peace. I find my peace in knowing that it is all going to work out. And I have to work to make it work out. But if I'm doing the best that I can, it's almost like, I don't even know what the metaphor is, but in my mind, I feel like, standing on a partially completed bridge, you see where you want to go. And if you take that step and then the next part of that bridge emerges, step into the emerges, to get to that place. And then a new destination will, it always pops up. But it's just being in that moment, as true as I can be to myself, and as present as I can be for myself and for others, and knowing that it's going to work out.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm getting from that, the word that hit me was faith. Faith in self, faith in something bigger, but trust and some faith. I love that. Thank you so much, Dr. Kim. That's the end of the questions that I have for you, and I very much appreciate you coming on.